Hello everyone and welcome to our channel. Get ready for a journey that might rewrite history as we know it. What I have to tell you today isn't just a theory or an ancient legend. It's the story of a shocking discovery, a historical letter supposedly written by none other than Pontius Pilate. Yes, we're talking about that Pilate, the Roman governor whose name is forever linked to the most controversial decision in human history. The one who, in a political and judicial act, ordered the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. But what if I told you that this letter reveals a side of Pilate we never imagined? Unexpected remorse and the witness to the resurrection. This letter, sent directly to Emperor Tiberius, isn't just a bureaucratic report. It brings to light Pilate's deep and unexpected remorse for his role in Christ's death. Imagine the burden on the conscience of a man who felt justice slip through his fingers, even as he washed his own hands. But the most surprising revelation is yet to come. Within this extraordinary document, Pilate not only details the trial and crucifixion, but also narrates something absolutely incredible. He witnesses the resurrection of Jesus. Yes, Pontius Pilate himself recorded the appearance and ascension of the Son of God, transforming himself from judge into an eyewitness to a miracle. An image never before seen, the physical details of Jesus. And as if all this drama and mystery weren't enough, the letter also presents us with something none of the Gospels offer: unprecedented details of Jesus' physical appearance. Get ready to visualize a Jesus you might never have imagined. Pilate describes his height, his demeanor that inspired both love and fear, the color and style of his hair, the features of his face, his beard, and, most fascinating, the intensity and color of his eyes. It's a rare and detailed description that allows us, for the first time, to have a vivid image of what Jesus truly looked like, through the eyes of his own persecutor. Stay with us until the end of this video, because we're going to dive into the full content of this letter and uncover what Pilate, the man who condemned Jesus, said about the Son of God. And don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to not miss any of our next videos. The beginning of the letter, Pilate's account of Jesus. With the audience's attention already captured by the introduction, it's time to delve into the first lines of this extraordinary letter. Pilate, a man of Roman formalities, begins his report to Emperor Tiberius Caesar with a proper salutation, but quickly moves to the heart of the matter, the appearance of a man who undeniably marked his era. He describes him as an extraordinary man of incomparable virtue, named Jesus Christ. The way Pilate presents him already denotes a profound recognition. Jesus is portrayed as someone who walked among people and was already widely recognized as a prophet of truth. Even more impactful, Pilate mentions that Jesus' own followers called him the Son of God, believing in his ability to do the impossible, resurrect the dead and heal all kinds of illnesses. Imagine the impact of these words on a Roman emperor, receiving a report from a distant governor about a man with such powers. It's from this point that Pilate's letter differs from any other document of the time, blending official reporting with admiration and awe for a unique being. Admired by many, envied by few. Despite the widespread admiration Jesus evoked, Pilate doesn't hesitate to point out the growing tension around him. He reports that, though revered by many, Jesus quickly aroused the envy and fierce opposition of Judea's religious leaders. This envy wasn't trivial. It culminated in the tragic events that led Jesus to judgment and, ultimately, to crucifixion. Pilate, in his own words, begins to paint the picture of a man who, despite his message of peace and miraculous deeds, became a threat to those who held religious power. It's crucial context for understanding why a man with such attributes ended up being condemned. The image of Christ through Pilate's eyes, the physical description. It's at this point that Pilate's letter becomes truly fascinating, offering a glimpse of Jesus that we don't find anywhere else. It's as if Pilate, in an effort to immortalize Jesus' image for Tiberius, presents us with a vivid and detailed portrait. He describes Jesus as a tall man, with a striking presence. His countenance, according to Pilate, simultaneously inspired love and fear, something rare to see in a single face. Whoever looked at him felt an almost reverent respect. Pilate goes further, detailing his hair the color of ripe chestnut, falling naturally to his shoulders. Notably, he points out a natural part at the crown of his head, a style reminiscent of Nazarenes, reinforcing his distinct and culturally relevant image. Continuing the portrait, Pilate observes that Jesus' forehead was flat and very delicate, reflecting an unusual smoothness. His face, surprisingly, had no blemishes or wrinkles, as if his skin were immune to imperfections. and a slight blush adorned his countenance, making his appearance even more harmonious. His nose and mouth were perfectly proportional and formed in a way that nothing could be criticized. Jesus' beard was thick, the same shade as his hair, slightly bifurcated, and not too long. These are meticulous details that seek to solidify Jesus' image in the reader's mind. The gaze that reproved without words. But it's in Jesus' eyes that Pilate truly delves deep, offering the most penetrating and unique description. He reports that Jesus' eyes were gray, clear, and bright, conveying an intensity that seemed to reach into the very core of everyone he looked at. Pilate describes these eyes as possessing an innate ability to reprove without needing words, just with a simple glance. It was as if they contained an ancient wisdom, capable of conveying calmness and, at the same time, firmness. Pilate mentions that, despite being extremely compassionate, Jesus had a noble demeanor that conveyed maturity and respect. This description of the eyes is one of the most striking points of the letter, for it reveals not only a physical characteristic but a window into the soul of Jesus, as seen by the one who, for a time, held his destiny in his hands. Jesus' character according to Pilate. Pilate's letter isn't limited to physical description. It delves into Jesus' character and personality. He describes him as a man who was serious, yet at the same time gentle and approachable. His words were tempered with profound wisdom, and Pilate notes that, while Jesus rarely laughed, he frequently wept. This final observation is particularly touching, as it reinforces Jesus' sensitivity and deep concern for those around him. It's the portrait of a spiritual leader who, despite his authority, demonstrated a human compassion and vulnerability that made him even more impactful to observers. Jesus' singular beauty. Pilate goes beyond facial features and posture, making a broader observation about Jesus' singular beauty. He states that Jesus surpassed all men in grace and appearance. This isn't just aesthetic beauty, but one that emanates from his presence and character. The governor even mentions that his hands and arms were especially pleasing to behold, a detail that further enhances the image of a serene and compassionate figure whose mere presence inspired respect and admiration. This perception of Jesus' beauty by Pilate suggests it wasn't merely superficial, but a manifestation of his inner essence. "My kingdom is not of this world." Pilate's narrative continues with one of the most emblematic moments of his interaction with Jesus. When questioned about his beliefs and his kingship, Jesus responded with a serenity and firmness that surely impacted the governor. "I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world." These words, full of mystery and meaning, made it clear to Pilate that he stood before someone whose convictions transcended physical domain and earthly powers. It was a declaration that, at once, calmed Roman political concerns. He was not an earthly king threatening Tiberius, and revealed the true nature of his mission. "I am the truth and the life." Impressed by Jesus' humility and unwavering firmness, Pilate tried to delve deeper, questioning him about his divine identity. "Are you a god?" Jesus' reply was laden with wisdom and simplicity. "You say that I am, for I am the truth and the life." This profound answer echoed in Pilate's mind, leading him to realize that Jesus was no ordinary man. He was someone who possessed an unusual understanding and worldview, a direct connection to concepts as fundamental as truth and life itself. This interaction solidified Pilate's perception that he stood before a truly exceptional figure. Political pressure and reluctant decision. However, Pilate's admiration for Jesus clashed with the harsh political reality. He reports in the letter that the situation in Jerusalem was tense, with riots intensifying and increasing pressure from religious leaders for Jesus' condemnation. Even though he was reluctant and found no guilt in Jesus, Pilate felt he had to give in to prevent a general uprising. He mentions that he ordered Jesus' crucifixion in an attempt to ensure peace and stability in the city. It's a clear portrayal of a Roman governor's dilemma, caught between justice and the need to maintain order in a volatile province. Signs at the moment of crucifixion. At the moment Pilate gave the command for the crucifixion, nature seemed to react. He narrates that something extraordinary happened. The sky darkened, the sun stopped shining, and stars appeared in broad daylight, as if nature itself were reacting to the injustice. This description of the supernatural phenomena at the moment of Jesus' death adds dramatic weight to Pilate's narrative, suggesting that even the cosmos recognized the magnitude of the event. Washing hands and the weight on his conscience. The scene of washing hands is one of history's most symbolic acts. Pilate mentions in the letter that, at that moment of the crucifixion, he felt an immense weight on his conscience. He rushed to wash his hands, symbolizing that he didn't want to be responsible for the blood of a righteous man. This gesture marked history as a man's attempt to distance himself from the condemnation of an innocent. However, Pilate knew that act wouldn't erase what had been done, and that moral responsibility would haunt him, as he himself expresses in the letter. Rumors of the resurrection and the empty tomb. After the dramatic events of the crucifixion, Pilate's letter reveals that Jerusalem began to be swept by disturbing rumors, whispers that Jesus had resurrected. These stories, circulating rapidly, reached Pilate's ears. Intrigued and somewhat concerned, he took action. He sent soldiers to investigate the tomb where Jesus had been buried. However, what the soldiers found defied all logic. The tomb was empty. The rumors intensified, saying that Jesus had appeared to various people, including his disciples, and that, finally, he had ascended to heaven. Pilate expresses in his letter a mixture of fear and curiosity, admitting he had never witnessed or heard of anything similar. This mystery led him to question deeply, for there was no logical explanation for the body's disappearance. An unexpected encounter, Jesus at the Pool of Siloam, a controversial detail. Pilate's letter also contains a striking episode and, for many scholars, a controversial detail, the account of an earlier encounter between Pilate and Jesus. The governor narrates that, one day, as he passed by the Pool of Siloam, he saw a group of people gathered. In their midst was a calm man, leaning against a tree and speaking softly. When he asked who it was, he was informed that it was Jesus. Pilate describes the scene as unforgettable, highlighting the contrast between Jesus, with his fair skin and golden hair, and the people around him, who had darker complexions. He claims he had never seen anyone with such a serene and sweet expression as Jesus, whose presence seemed to radiate an indescribable peace. This description of Jesus' appearance is particularly intriguing, as it raises questions about its historical accuracy and has been a subject of academic discussion over the years. Was it truly possible that Jesus had these characteristics, or was it a later addition to the letter? Regardless of the doubts, Pilate records this almost mystical vision of a man who appeared to be about 30 years old and whose features seemed to belong to another world, reinforcing his image as a special figure. Secretary Manales hears Jesus' teachings. Though tempted to approach and speak with Jesus, Pilate decided not to interrupt the moment. Instead, he instructed his secretary, Manales, a man he trusted and who knew the Hebrew language, to join the crowd and listen to what Jesus had to say. Manales returned to the praetorium to relay Jesus' words, and according to him, he had never before heard anything so profound and wise, not even in the works of Rome's most respected philosophers. One of the examples Manales narrated to Pilate was Jesus' answer to one of the Jewish rebels who had asked if it was right to pay tribute to Caesar. Jesus responded with his characteristic wisdom, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." This phrase, besides carrying political wisdom, revealed a sense of justice that touched Pilate. He saw in Jesus a man who, despite his popularity, was neither revolutionary nor a threat to the Roman Empire. Pilate's initial decision to grant Jesus freedom. Impressed by Jesus' wisdom and serene demeanor, Pilate made a crucial decision. He decided to grant Jesus freedom to teach and gather disciples, without any restriction from the Roman government. Pilate believed that by allowing Jesus to pursue his path, he was promoting peace and avoiding conflicts in his province. This attitude shows that, initially, Pilate didn't see Jesus as a criminal or a threat, but as a figure who could even bring stability. However, this decision caused indignation among the religious leaders of the time, who saw in Jesus a direct threat to their own authority and status. Growing pressure and change of decision. Despite Pilate's initial stance, the situation in Jerusalem was a powder keg. He narrates that complaints against Jesus became frequent in the praetorium. The religious leaders wouldn't accept his free presence and growing popularity, and even threatened to appeal directly to Caesar if Pilate didn't take action. Even amidst this intense pressure, Pilate remained firm in his decision, as he saw no reason to arrest Jesus. He believed that exiling him or accusing him without justification would be contrary to the principles of justice that the Romans upheld. However, the climate of tension continued to grow, and realizing that an insurrection was imminent, Pilate took an extreme measure to restore peace. He felt he couldn't allow a conflict to escalate in his province. And so he finally decided to condemn Jesus, not because he found him guilty, but to avoid a larger crisis and a widespread uprising. The trial and the choice between Jesus and Barabbas. In a final effort to try to evade responsibility and shift the decision to the people, Pilate recounts in the letter his ultimate attempt to free Jesus. He offered the crowd the choice between Jesus and a known prisoner, Barabbas, a criminal. His clear intention was that the crowd, given the options, would prefer to free Jesus. To his surprise and despair, the people chose to save Barabbas and condemn Jesus. Witnessing this choice, Pilate understood that something deeper was at play, something he might never fully comprehend, and that his fate was sealed by the will of the mob. Mysterious events after the crucifixion, darkness and the dead. Pilate's letter reveals that, immediately after Jesus' execution, mysterious and inexplicable events shook Jerusalem. He reports a deep darkness that covered the city at midday, something he had never witnessed. The sun simply vanished from the sky, and stars appeared in broad daylight, while the moon seemed tinged with blood. This darkness terrified the population, and the atmosphere was one of supernatural unease. And what's even more impressive, Pilate recounts that some of the dead were seen leaving their tombs and walking among the living. These signs seem to indicate that the entire world was reacting to Jesus' death, lending it a cosmic and divine dimension. These events deeply shook Pilate, who felt a heavy guilt settling into his conscience. He realized that the act of washing his hands wouldn't be enough to free himself from the burden of what he had done. Pilate mentions in the letter that the impact of Jesus' crucifixion was so great that it seemed to have changed the course of history, and that he believed those events would be remembered for generations. Even without fully understanding Jesus' mission, he knew that the meaning of his death transcended any comprehension. The search for the empty tomb and Pilate's questions. The letter then shifts into Pilate's personal reflection on his own life and his role in governing Jerusalem. He reveals that, after the crucifixion, the city seemed enveloped in a strange melancholy, and rumors of Jesus' resurrection began to circulate among the populace. Some said Jesus had appeared to his followers, while others claimed he had been seen by many before ascending to heaven. Pilate, though incredulous yet deeply intrigued, couldn't ignore these stories. To try and understand what had truly happened, he ordered soldiers to Jesus' tomb. However, the confirmation was astonishing. The tomb was empty. The soldiers reported that the stone sealing it had been removed, and Jesus' body was no longer there. This mystery led Pilate to question deeply, for he knew there was no logical explanation for the body's disappearance. It was an enigma that would haunt him. Jesus' legacy and Pilate's remorse. At the end of his letter, Pilate expresses a mixture of remorse and fascination. He realizes that Jesus' figure was incomparable and that, somehow, his brief passage through Jerusalem had left an indelible mark on everyone who encountered him, including Pilate himself. Pilate admits that, looking back, his life had been transformed by his brief encounter with Jesus, and that he would never be the same. Pilate's testimony, then, concludes with a confession that, although he had fulfilled his duty as governor, something in his heart had changed forever. He sensed that, perhaps, he had stood before someone extraordinary, a being whose mission transcended any earthly power. With this perception, he concludes his letter to Tiberius, suggesting that what happened in Jerusalem would not be forgotten and that, in time, perhaps the Roman Empire itself would come to recognize Jesus' importance. This testimony about the resurrection and the potential immortality of Jesus' message shows the impact he had even on his adversaries. The Pilate stone, historical evidence. To reinforce the authenticity and historical relevance of Pilate's account, it's essential to mention a crucial archaeological evidence, the Pilate stone. This artifact was discovered centuries later, near the theater of Caesarea Maritima, in the region where Pilate governed. It's an inscription on stone that mentions his name, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, and dedicates that space to Emperor Tiberius. Although the artifact was found long after his time, it represents concrete archaeological evidence of Pilate's presence in that region, connecting this ancient history with material reality. The Pilate stone serves as a physical reminder that the man who wrote this letter truly existed and exercised his authority at such a crucial moment in history. Pilate's testimony through the centuries and Jesus' lasting message. Returning to the central theme, Pilate reflects that his testimony about Jesus might be questioned or ignored by the powers of Rome. However, his letter and the subsequent discovery of the Pilate stone ensured this wouldn't happen. Over the centuries, this letter, as well as the Pilate stone, became an object of study and reflection for those seeking historical evidence about Jesus. The details of Jesus' appearance, described by Pilate, were passed down through generations, as a rare representation of what his physiognomy was like. His golden hair, penetrating eyes, and majestic posture, combined with his humility and wisdom, are traits that are still recognized and revered today. The letter ends with a note of Pilate's reflection on the impact of his decision, suggesting to Tiberius that rumors of resurrection and stories about Jesus should not be ignored, for they seem to carry a deeper truth. He knew that the story of Jesus' crucifixion would not disappear, and that simple man, condemned to prevent a revolt, was destined for a much greater role. With this last thought, he seals his narrative, as if he sensed that his own life was forever marked by Jesus' presence in his journey. Thus, the Pilate stone and the letter are much more than mere historical relics. They are powerful testimonies that Jesus truly lived and left an indelible impression, not only on those who followed him, but also on those who participated, directly or indirectly, in his trial. And today, knowing the content of this letter, we can understand how a Roman governor, in an ethical and political dilemma, ended up becoming one of the first to recognize the depth and singularity of the figure of Jesus Christ. Lord, our God and Father, in this space of faith and learning, we ask for your blessing upon every person who comes here. May this channel be a beacon of light, a place where your word is sown and your truth revealed. May every video, every story, every revelation, like the one we shared today about Pilate's letter, touch hearts, strengthen faith, and inspire the pursuit of your knowledge. May the information presented here serve to edify, to clarify doubts, and to deepen understanding of the mysteries of your work. Guide us, Father, so that we may continue to bring content that glorifies your name and helps our community grow in grace and wisdom. Bless all who contribute and all who watch, so that, together, we may walk the path of salvation. In Jesus' name, amen. And so, we've reached the end of another incredible journey, uncovering secrets and strengthening our faith. The story of Pilate's letter and its revelation about Jesus is another link connecting us with the truth and power of Christ. If this message touched you, if you felt your faith renewed, or if you simply loved uncovering this intriguing part of history, I have a special invitation for you. Leave your like on this video. Your support is fundamental for this message to reach even more people. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Join our community of seekers of truth and salvation. Activate the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of our next videos, which will continue to explore the Word, history, and mysteries that bring us closer to God. Share this video with someone else who needs to hear this story and have their faith strengthened. Your help is vital for the truth to spread. Thank you so much for being here. May God bless you richly and abundantly. See you in the next video, and continue your journey in the pursuit of salvation.